There he is.
Yeah.
Hey.
What's up?
Welcome back to another episode of Public Access America. I'm Jason, he's Jeffrey, and we just have some random news stories and thoughts to get through. I hope you enjoy the live stream, which you can find on YouTube, noon Eastern, 9 a.m. Pacific. What's going on, Jeffrey? I'm so happy. I haven't seen you in like a week.
I know. It's been busy, dude.
I know, right?
And on top
Before
of that,
before we
everybody's
get,
got a cold.
no way.
Yep, not
I just
COVID, just a cold.
I just got my flu shot. That's so amazing.
I think
I
mine's fallout from my flu shot too.
Really? Yeah, I
Yeah,
felt ran down and I didn't know why until my arm started hurt. My arm didn't start hurting until like a day later, but I felt run down and I was like, I don't know why.
yeah.
So I want to apologize to you for last week. I was having some blood sugar issues. I was like avoiding doctors and yeah, it just got a little bit too much. And listening back to the episode, I was like, wow, dude. I don't have that brain fog normally. And so yeah, I apologize for that.
Dude, that's life.
Yeah, it is.
That's one of those things. Well, hopefully you're feeling better today at least.
Yeah, I am. Blood sugar is like a drug, an addict, like an addiction. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
You have to realize that, and whew, it gets bad. So before we get started, I wanted to ask everybody to rise so that we can say the Pledge of Allegiance to this flag that I found from Donald Trump's White House bathroom.
Yee.
I didn't know who Glenn Youngkin was, but come on, seeing a bunch of people like say the Pledge of Allegiance to a flag that was supposedly a part of the insurrection, I thought that was a bit too far.
That's some cringe right there. That's some hot solid cringe.
Yeah, I'm wondering, like, I always wonder what's going to be over the top for that side of the spectrum, you know what I mean? And I thought to myself, that has to be that has to be, right?
Well, that we'll go with that's over the top for now, and it'll come back down a little bit. But I have a feeling we're not to the summit of this mountain yet.
Well, I think the goal is to have levels of chaos, just to have random people causing chaos and politics avoiding addressing it so that in 2024, Trump can say, look at all the chaos. I can fix it, obviously. You know what I mean? So
Well,
I think
I mean,
stupid people are doing stupid things for no good reason.
I honestly see that as particularly viable simply because you've had Trump come out and tell Republicans not to vote for Republicans in
Yeah.
2022, and I'm like, this is an interesting play here, but I
Hmm.
can see where they're trying to go with it. I
Yeah.
don't think that it's going to work quite as well as they want it to.
They're playing, what they're doing is they're setting up instances of voter fraud for the next 2024 so they can say look at in 2022, look at all the stuff that went wrong because they made laws to make things go wrong, you know what I mean?
Right, right, and I think that's definitely it. The other part of it is that the stuff that they're putting on the books is garbage, so they
Yeah.
want to be able to say, "Look at this. This is voter fraud," and it's like I've been telling people, it's like all of these states where they're claiming voter fraud, like they've had mail-in voting for a long time. Like this isn't
Hmm.
something that's new
Right.
necessarily. And on top of that, a lot of them, put in mail-in voting as Republican controlled up and down uh legislative branches. And so
Hmm.
the idea that it was fraud is like, look, you made the rules. Why are you pissed that you lost by them?
Right. Well,
It's not fraud.
the big thing what they're saying is that we change the voting systems were changed because of the pandemic, and so it wasn't the routine process. It's that we created COVID, we expanded COVID to suppress people, but when that didn't work, you know, we went to
Hmm.
this route, and it's just horrible.
Hmm.
That's just horrible.
Yeah. It's one of those things where I think you have a bunch of people who are pissed that they made the rules and then they lost by the rules, and and they can't do anything about it. It's like, I don't know what to tell you guys. It's like, even then, you look at all of the other Republican held states that, had mail-in voting put in place, and they did just fine.
Yeah.
There's no questions there, except for now in Texas, where, you know, Trump's looking for, well, of course, see, this is how it's done because I won. And it's like, no, that's not how it works. That's called confirmation bias. We've talked about this several times. Um, just because, you get the result that you're expecting, that doesn't necessarily mean that it's right. If somebody else does the test and they get the same result, then yeah, then the system worked the way that it was designed. I will say that's the key word, the way that it was designed, not the way that it should or the way that you expect it to. And that's the problem, is that people are complaining about fraud, but the systems worked as designed. Now
Right.
you can have discussions about whether or not that design was actually correct. You can absolutely sit down and figure out, hey, did this have some unintended consequences? Unintended consequences do not equal fraud.
Right. We're always tweaking the system to make it better, but not overhauling it like they are proposing, you know.
Right.
And
And so,
having just one side of it do it without input from the other side, I would be mad if Democrats did that. You know what I mean?
mhm.
So it's not bipartisan, it's not neutral, it's not even center proposals. It's right wing to be right wing.
Exactly. And unfortunately, that's what you're going to deal with, is that as politicians decide to do things in a partisan fashion,
Mhm.
you're going to end up with red states having red representatives by design. You're going to end up with blue states having blue representatives by design. And they're going to point the finger at each other and be all butthurt and upset. And it's like, look, you guys are doing the same shit. It's like,
Mhm.
you can either figure out what fair representation or equal representation looks like, or in my opinion, both these parties just got to go because it's trash.
Yeah. Somebody, before we get started with the notes, somebody on the news was saying that they believe that if Trump runs in 2024, it will give enough space for a third party.
It's entirely possible, but we've been hearing that since
Hmm.
2016. So,
Yeah.
you know, with Hillary and Trump running, it was like, oh, this is going to be the rise of the third party. With Trump and Biden running, oh, this is going to be the rise of the third party. The
Yeah.
problem is that whether or not we want to believe this, we're starting to see every election as life or death, which
Yep.
is really fucking weird,
And
and
they're
that's
every
that's
two
not
years.
healthy. And that's not healthy. And so when the next presidential election comes around and we're like, ah, shit, if we don't vote blue or if we don't vote red, and that's what you end up having, is that you end up having, 96% of voters vote for these two parties.
Right.
And, you get 4% voting for a smattering of anywhere from 3 to 7,
Mm.
plus
What I
Mickey
what
Mouse.
what I do like is Evan McMullen in Utah running against Mike Lee. And he's a conservative, but he's running as an independent just to show that he's not a Trumpublican. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? And I like that because now, if you take the D, we said this with Sierra a long time ago. If
Hmm.
you take the D and the R off of somebody, you can actually listen to their proposals and not their rhetoric. And so what I see is more people running as an independent because not only do you not have the stigma of the D or R, but you also don't have to raise campaign donations simply to feed that beast, you know?
And that's a huge part of it, is that, if you want significant campaign donations, they have to put that letter behind their name.
Right.
Companies, and my hope is that based on the last few years, companies are going to be gun shy about throwing in on candidates, because
I agree.
let's be realistic. Companies that threw in behind Trump in 2016 regretted it in 2020, and they didn't do
Mhm.
it.
Yeah.
And companies that have thrown in behind Biden are regretting it now too. And I don't blame any of them. The thing is that I do understand why companies want to lobby for their interests. I
Hmm.
just don't I just don't believe that it needs to be done the way that it's doing, the way
Wow.
that they're doing it. You know, trying to put in a specific candidate. And I think they found out that this has come back to bite them in more ways than one because, you look at the amount of money that, the big ones have spent, Microsoft, Facebook, Amazon,
Hmm.
Google, and Apple, and now they're all like, oh shit, this is not good. We have wasted money. And it's like, yes, you
Yeah.
have.
Right. Were you looking at the show note? Because I had that in there, the fall of America or whatever, what broke America. And it was all about lobbyists. And I was like, this note is way too long, has nothing in there. There's no conversation, but it is. There's three pharmaceutical reps for every member of Congress. And they spent over $100 million this year because they're
Mhm.
afraid of Medicare negotiating prescription prices. And that's how our business works. It doesn't really matter if I'm some grandma that needs my insulin that's $900 a month because that lobbyist just paid, I don't know, name a congressman, $10,000 to not let her have her insulin cheap, you know?
Well, and as we're finding out too, it sounds like, and this is going to be one of those across both parties things.
Hmm.
We're finding out that there are Republican and Democrat candidates out there that are using their campaign funds to live very lavish lifestyles on the campaign
Yes.
trail. And
Right.
and it's like, look, don't get me wrong, I don't think that it should be, drive through McDonald's every day. That's not good for a person. But, the fact that, they're getting all of this very high-end care that is,
Yeah.
well, as we've talked about, it's the best care our money can buy,
Yeah.
our money. And it's like, if we're going to keep donating to politicians like this, we can't keep getting pissed that they're spending it the way that they are. You're literally giving them the power to do so.
Right. And they're getting the salary of up to $400,000 a year and a pension. You know what
Hmm.
I mean? After 4 years. So it's not like they're not going to be taken care of, but why are we taking care of them when they're just taking money on the side to take care of themselves in a perpetual election, you know?
Hmm. No, it's absolutely ridiculous. And the
Mhm.
idea that this is one of those things that the American people are going to keep funding, and
That's
and
the
it it
problem.
it is a problem. But I would say that, you know, uh, for example, Facebook is now facing the wrath of both parties for different reasons, but ultimately
Hmm.
the same thing.
And the people.
Hmm.
Yeah.
It's like, if you want to talk about regret and throwing money into politics, that should probably be company number one.
Right. But
And
the thing is like after the impeachment, the second impeachment of Donald Trump, and Mitch McConnell stood up and said, hey, he needs to be prosecuted. Companies said, we're not going to donate to your party. So he came back and he was like, whatever. And he tried to work it over. But the truth is corporations are gun shy about donating to Republicans. So Republicans have moved their apparatus to the everyday person and tried to scam them and force them into donating. They just sent out an ad that said you're a traitor if you haven't donated to Donald Trump and you could be treasonous. That's ridiculous language for a email donation request. You know what I
mhm.
mean?
Oh, absolutely. And then you had Ted Cruz saying that, all of these companies, what was it? All of these companies that were wanting money out of politics. Well, we see you and we'll remember you and blah blah blah. And I'm like,
Hmm.
wow, okay, you said the quiet part out loud.
Yep.
Where it was like, well, the next time you come asking us for a tax break, and I'm like, Ted Cruz is saying the quiet part out loud again.
Yep. And HR1 removes all of that dark money from politics. And I think that's a big deal. But I think that's going to be left out of the voting rights. They keep slimming it down, and that's what Democrats do. We have this great idea, and we're going to let people knock it down till it's not a good idea, and then we're going to pass it. And they don't
Absolutely.
understand their messaging is just horrible. I always tell people, tell me what you did, not what you're doing. You don't get credit for what you're doing. You get credit for what you did. And
Yeah.
Democrats don't realize that. Republicans, they're shit, right? But they can say, look what we did because they actually
Mm.
do stuff.
Yeah, no, and that's just it. Is that what people are going to realize here real quickly is that the tax breaks, that the Republicans passed, albeit one-sided, they did a lot of great things for business. And unfortunately, I hate to say it, while it did a lot of great things, it did a lot of great things for small businesses, which absolutely needed it. But it did more for large businesses, super large corporations that already weren't, paying a hell of a lot in taxes, if any at all.
Well, we wanted
So,
to see how trickle down worked. And honestly, stock buybacks was the only drawback to trickle down. Like if they could have invested that money in technology and people and, all of that stuff, maybe trickle down would have worked. But corporations took it as an investment in themselves instead of in their communities.
well, they didn't even take it as an investment in themselves, and that's the real issue at hand. Because even when you invest in yourself, that means that you're at least expanding in some way, shape, or
Hmm.
form into some useful market. A lot of these corporations, they didn't do that. What they
Right.
did was, they expanded their upper echelons pay,
Right.
and then eventually they were like, "Oh, shit, we still got too much money. All right, fine. What was that number you wanted? $15 an hour? Oh, fuck it. Here you go."
Right. But it took that much. It took that much saturation of wealth to get it to trickle down.
Hmm.
Yeah.
And even then, I will say that they're probably one of the potential good ideas. I say potential because
Mhm.
I've yet to see how it's really going to work out. Is you've had, some of these mega corporations start to venture into pharmaceutical land, like
Okay.
Walmart and Amazon. So the question is can Walmart and Amazon actually be uh, undercut the market in terms of drug prices? And as much as I don't want to see that happen, at the same time, under the current model, it's not working.
Under the capitalist model, right? Under a socialist model, prescriptions would work, pharmaceuticals would work.
Well, and here's where this is a bit more difficult,
Mm.
because while I understand where that's coming from, at the same time too, like unless you're getting money from the people to then filter to these corporations for R&D into new meds,
Right.
what most people don't realize is that yes, when you have a technology that's already present and you're looking to disseminate that, sure, socialism can work. If you're banking on new technologies or
Mhm.
new medications, it doesn't work, because
Gotcha.
you still have to have that money for R&D one way or
Hmm.
another, period, end of story. And if it isn't coming from the government funding it, aka us funding it, then it's
Right.
going to come from us funding it directly, and that's what our current system looks like. I think that the issue at hand is really what corporate pay looks like in terms of
Oh yeah.
how they pay their CEOs, how they pay their uppers.
Hmm.
Because the reality is that, when you have that much money filtering through those people, it makes me question how much more money you need when you're bitching about the fact that you need more money for R&D. It's like, don't
Hmm.
get me wrong, it's not that I don't think the work that CEOs do is, easy street in and of itself in any way, shape, or form. But when you have people making, $50 million bonuses, that's a hell of a lot of
Right.
R&D money that is just going into somebody's pocket who doesn't need it. And that to me is problematic.
And yeah, what's the trickle down of that salary? You have to make profits, right? So I understand, like, why would you R&D something if you're not going to make a profit off it? And that's the CEO's job. But yeah, like a lot of people, they're getting denied coverage because the company wants to make a profit and paying out
Hmm.
isn't profitable. And so when people say Medicare for all will be cheaper, that's what it's based on. Medicare for all would be cheaper because it would eliminate those salaries. You know what I mean? And that's where the money would come from.
But in your experience too, just because Medicare for all would be cheaper, you know what your current allowance is,
Oh,
and it's
sure.
shit.
A, a used garbage can is still a used garbage can. You know what I mean?
Right. And that's just it, is that I get why people want to do things the way that, the idealist
Hmm.
expects. Yeah, it'll, for example, renewable energy is one of my favorite examples. It's like just because the technology is out there and more prevalent, that doesn't mean that the technology is in a good spot. You think about it, like if Apple stopped R&D after the first iPhone, and that's all
Right.
they did was produce the first iPhone, you
Right.
know, could you imagine what that would look like right now?
We wouldn't have iPhones anymore.
No. And that's
Mm-mm.
just it, is that, I understand why people want, when they see the technology that exists and they're like, I want that and I want that now. Absolutely. So do
Hmm.
I. But it's not just about what there is now, it's what you want coming down the pipeline too. And with these and I would argue that the way that we did things for COVID really opened up the social side of the process.
Yeah.
And there's no question about that, because all of these companies got a large injection of funds in order to produce vaccines, monoclonal antibodies, new antiviral medications,
Right.
um, all of these different things. It's not that the technology wasn't there, it just didn't have the funding that it needed in order to get over that R&D hump.
Right.
And so this is where people need to understand is that when you have that injection of funds, the idea of having the government pay for the thing itself, not necessarily the most uh not necessarily the best thing to do with your money, but when you have the government fund the idea, that's where you start to see the actual benefit.
I
And
do
so that's
like
where
that.
and so that's where, you know, it's not about picking the winner and loser. Like, the government threw a lot of money behind a lot of different drug makers, big ones,
Hmm.
some that were less known. I mean,
Right.
yeah, Pfizer's huge, Johnson and Johnson is huge, but Moderna
Was a little thing created by Obama.
is a little tiny thing, and
Yeah.
suddenly there it is, with one of the
Hmm.
best vaccines on the market, and throwing that money in there to then make throwing that R&D money in there to then make a cheaper purchase of the product later was an effective strategy. It worked.
It did work. And if we could do that militarily, that would be great. Like we don't need to spend money on nukes anymore, but if we invest that money into R&D to protect our infrastructure digitally or, however that works, that would be great too. You know what I mean?
And I can see it now too. It's like you're going to see the rise of, for example, China just tested a hypersonic missile
Mm,
that circled the Earth once before then hitting its target.
wow.
And people are nervous about that. And it was a nuclear capable missile. Absolutely.
Was it? Didn't
Yep.
Russia try that with a
Well,
like a nuclear powered missile?
yeah, they have a hypersonic missile as well. We don't. I think we're in the process of testing ours. But the reality is that okay, great. So you have really fast missiles. You know what the only thing faster than hypersonic missiles is? Speed of light, lasers. And guess what? The glorious thing about lasers is you only need the light to hit the target, and then boop, it goes down. Bye bye.
Right.
So to me, it's like, sure, you can have all of these different weapons that are meant to destroy humanity, but I think the idea of the idea of that is just absolutely heinous. It's time to like actually sit down and look at, you know, if you really feel the need to defend your country, it's not looking, nukes are not the answer.
Isn't it
They're,
amazing that nukes are mutually assured destruction, but all it takes is some rhetoric from Russia into an anti-vaxxer thing to make our entire country sick?
well, now Russia's having that problem too. I don't know if you've seen that in the news.
Mm-mm.
They are, for the first time throughout the whole pandemic, they're recording over 1,000 deaths a day,
Wow.
and their vaccine acceptance is insanely low. Like, I want to
Wow.
say like maybe 25% of their population has gotten vaccinated,
Wonder
despite the
why.
fact that they've got vaccine hesitancy. They are not convinced that the Sputnik vaccine is the way to go.
Wow.
Now, and that's the thing, is like, I don't know what the problem with the Sputnik vaccine is that we just haven't had a real good look at the efficacy of it.
Right.
So, or the effective treatment of it, the effective treatment with it. So it's hard to
Hmm.
say like how good it is, based on what they said, in their initial trials, is that it was pretty good.
Right. And it was information gathered through hacks. Like they had real information. It wasn't like they were creating it on their own. They were gathering everybody else's information, which I thought should have been made public anyway. So I'm not upset that they gathered the information to make the vaccine, but it's not a vaccine. It was the first one to come out, Sputnik, right? And yeah, they didn't test it. Like we got lucky. Israel was our independent test. And
Pretty
then
much.
so we had that backup. And so ours was tested, but Sputnik's wasn't. It was like we made it, let's go. And so
Yeah.
I see that. But I don't know if they've updated it or, like we have,
No, I don't know either. And that's the tough part, is that when you have countries that don't necessarily follow the same sort of testing guidelines. And this is
Hmm.
where, like, it would be nice if we all followed one testing guideline and we could all look at the data. Like
Yeah.
like we've said before, it's like I don't I don't think vaccine nationalism is a good idea. I think vaccine availability is, and if Russia's Sputnik 5 vaccine looks to be effective, and that you're not having mass side effect issues with it, I think then great, that's fantastic. It turns out the Sinovac didn't work, and it had very little. It's like 50% effective or something like that. I mean, even Johnson and Johnson's one-shot vaccine was better than that. So the reality is that I don't really care who makes the vaccine, as long as it's safe and effective, and you can test that across multiple populations. If India comes up with a better vaccine, great. If the European Union comes up with a better vaccine, great. If the African Union came up with a better vaccine, or Latin America, great, awesome. Vaccine nationalism is just a terrible disaster, and there's no reason for it. So for me, looking at how Sputnik V works, Sputnik 5, it does make me wonder, because I do want to see Russia have a safe and effective vaccine, or access to safe and effective vaccines. Having 1,000 deaths a day is a bad flex.
Yeah. It's not a good look. Mm-mm.
No. So,
Yeah.
but Russia's government has taken to blaming the people for not getting the vaccine now. So, but
Yeah.
they're still refusing to do any type of mandates or anything like that. So I'm wondering how long that's going to hold out before they're finally like, listen.
I don't think they mind if the people die. It's less of a hassle for them, right?
Yeah, I mean, nothing like creating job security by opening up a few positions.
I think it's a conspiracy. I don't want to get into it.
Ooh,
Anyway,
I like
I,
conspiracies though.
I think I think Republicans, they're in their end game, right? It's like it's what they've been planning for, the end times, and I think they're actually acting on it. And I think one of their goals is to depopulate the planet by just letting people die, like avoiding helping them. Just overall, country by country by country, that's what I see is like leadership abandoning the people and letting them die at the right moment. And it just
Mm.
bugs me. And I'm not saying, maybe independently they're all saying this is a great idea. Maybe they're not sitting around like Austin Powers, going, but I think they don't mind if people die because we're a problem.
Well, and I mean, realistically, it's like it's a weird. It's the way that they did this too is just absolutely weird. Look, I'm as much for people being able to be free to make their own choices as much as the next person is. But they started with the conspiracy theories first, and then moved into you know, I believe in your freedom of choice, but the vaccine, and it's like, and especially for a group of people who got vaccinated. So,
That's just it. Everyone telling you not to get vaccinated literally got vaccinated. And I want to say, like, because Dan said this in our episode and it sticks with me, this new drug that comes out, this scrambles your DNA. Yeah. Like it's not something you want done. And it just scares me that that's the route they're telling people to go. You don't want to trust a vaccine that contains inert COVID, oil, salt, and sugar, but you're willing to have your DNA scrambled on a cellular level for your politics. That's just freaky to
And
me.
that's well, and that's the thing is it's not even inert COVID material. It's literally you're literally bringing out the instructions on how to make the spike protein. It's not even that you're being
Right.
injected with COVID. You're literally telling the body, here's how you make the spike protein. Okay, now fight it.
Exactly. And everything else is the oil and sugar and salt is just to get it where it needs to go.
Mhm.
It's not even so I don't understand. The vaccine is so simple. Like even the modern vaccine, I just got like I told you, I just got my flu shot. I didn't even think
Yep.
about it. And there was more questions about the flu shot than there was about COVID. Are you allergic to eggs? Are you allergic to latex? Have you ever reacted negatively before? A lot of questions about a flu
Hmm.
shot. So
Yep.
I don't know. I'm all in favor of vaccines. I'm 50 now. I can't wait to get my shingles shot. Like for 2 years, I've been watching, going, I can get it. I can get it at 50 because I'm prone to getting these things early. You know what I mean? I want to be
Right.
protected. Shoot.
And then, like me, I was telling a couple of my coworkers, it's like, look, for me, it took me a minute to realize, that I was better off getting the vaccine because my lungs were trash anyways, being an asthmatic.
Mm-hmm.
So, the idea that I wasn't going to get the vaccine, it was like, it was never a question. It was just a question of, I hadn't seen a whole lot of data at that point. I'd heard some anecdotes, yeah, but as far as data goes, I hadn't seen much for data.
Right.
Once I saw enough data, I'm like, yeah, no, it's good. It's like
Yeah.
probably have some side effects like everybody else, but you go get a tetanus shot and your freaking arm goes dead for 2 days, which
Right.
I get to go do in a couple of weeks because apparently it's been 14 years since I got my last tetanus shot.
You're supposed to get them every 10 years, no?
Yeah, I kind of
Yeah.
forgot. I was
Okay.
like, crap, I should go do that.
That's what I do. I put off my own medical needs just to distract myself, and I don't know why.
Well, and that's the thing is like I know that I should do it simply because it's like I'm constantly working around stuff that's rusty, whether I'm
Hmm.
doing working on my own projects or somebody else's. It's like there's
Right.
no reason that I shouldn't go out and get my tetanus shot. So,
Yeah. I want to say like I actually I was looking for a doctor in Pensacola, Florida, and I'm from Chicago. So I'm used to a little bit more advanced um medical care, than they have down here. And I looked for a doctor until I found one. She had no rating, but she was from Colorado. And I was like, I called the office and I talked to the manager and I was like, is she nice? And they were like, she is really nice and she holds 5 degrees. And so I looked her up on Facebook and she had her stuff locked down, but her husband didn't. And I found a video of her playing violin with her kids for Christmas. And I was like, she's a music lover. And I talked to her and I explained to her that I'm nutrition based. Like, my you can't tell how high my sugar is because I'm full of double whoppers, but
mhm.
let's get us and she loved it. So research
Yeah.
your doctors and check them out. Like it's important. We just go to the first doctor we can find and then deal with that. You know what I mean? And I think people
Well,
should, it makes me more comfortable going to the doctor knowing she's a good doctor.
and that's, and that I think, that all just depends on the insurance model you have too. Like the insurance
Hmm.
model that I'm on, there's so many doctors that I could go see, and I happen to love my doctor, and she's a combination of sweet and sassy smartass that works for me. That's what I grew up with.
Right. Yep.
It's like, I'm gonna act like an idiot, and she's gonna give me some shit for it,
Right.
and you know what? It works because that's what I'm used to. That's what I need.
That's what
It's
I
like, all
need.
right, fine, okay, you're right. God damn
Yep.
it.
Shame me into it with logic and sarcasm. That's how I
You
need
know,
to be. That's
and
how I
that's the
need
thing
it.
is like, I've told people, it's like, look, go visit with your doctor, and you have to trust that their decision is the right one
Hmm.
for you. And that's just it is like, yeah, of course, when I went to go get my blood pressure meds, I was fucking nervous about it. The idea of messing with anything in my body just makes me inherently nervous. But
Hmm.
In the same token, I can't sit there and tell people you need to go talk to your doctor and listen to them and then ignore them.
Right.
And and it's like, fuck, all right, you know what? You're right. You're right. Absolutely. I need to be on this medication.
Yep.
And it's good and it's helping. It's absolutely helping. And I'm not noticing any side effects from it. So great.
Yay.
Fantastic.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
stoked.
She told me I needed the blood pressure medication and a cholesterol medication. And she said, "Are you taking those?" And I was like, "Why would I? I eat salads every day and I don't have a blood." And she said, "Well, it's the combination. Like the blood sugar medication can't do all the things that you need done. And somebody with diabetes is equally at risk for a heart attack as somebody that's already previously had a heart attack. Nobody has ever told me that before. So guess what I'm doing? I'm taking all my medications now. Doesn't
Right.
matter if my blood sugar's low if I have a heart attack, right?
Well, that's the thing is like yeah, you you have to learn all of this stuff, and nobody ever like gives you a good rundown of it. And
Right.
anymore, like right now, we're also afraid to ask our doctor about anything because it's like, oh
Mm-hmm.
my God, what if they tell me something and I don't understand it? It's like, well, then ask them to fucking explain it.
Yep. Ask them again.
And that's what I did. I was like, "Ah, I don't like the idea of this." It's like, okay, because I'm on enough medications that do different things and
Right.
have different side effects, and I don't need them interacting with each other. I really don't.
I mean, you don't want to get and take another medication to counter an effect of a medication.
Exactly. And then we had that discussion and she was like, look, if that happens and you start experiencing a side effect, I'm not just going to put you on something to cover the side effect.
Good.
We're going to pull meds and we're going to find out what the effective combination is for you.
I love
It's like,
that.
all right, you got me convinced.
And my doctor offered me consultations with the pharmacist. Like they have a pharmacist center to get you to your goals. Like I can go in there at any time and show them my diabetes log and they'll work with me to say, well, this isn't work. This you need to take your medication here instead of here after 2 hours after eating, not a half, and all those wonderful things that you need to get off of the medication because
Right.
medication is a patch, right?
Hmm.
To me, it is.
It is.
Although there's two types of diabetes, there's insulin resistance, and then there's what they think I am, was where your pancreas just kind of says, well, we're not going to do as much as we used to do,
Mm, yeah. It's like, oh, you're wanting me to do more? You're wanting me to do the same thing, but I'm tired.
I'm tired. But I asked her, like, is insulin resistance a thing? Because I saw those commercials on TV all the time, with Golo or whatever the stuff is to get rid of diabetes. And I asked her, and she said, "Yep, insulin resistance is a real thing. It's like your cells are packed with sugars, and it slowly leaches out into your bloodstream, so that your body is constantly making insulin to deal with that. And what you can do is go to a plant-based diet for a little while and get rid of all of that that's in your cells. And then you get rid of diabetes if you're insulin resistance that way. But that's not me. They don't think that's me, but I am acting like it's me. I'm on a plant-based diet so that I can, if my cells are packed with sugar, get rid of that. And then I'll know where I stand,
Yeah.
and I'm going to start looking into what feeds the pancreas. Like maybe I'm just not getting the right nutrition to create insulin, and I know other people have thought about that. So there's going to be a plenty of research on it.
Oh, absolutely. And I know that they're doing research on it all the time too.
Mm-hmm.
I was looking at a couple of things to see what there was for Debbie's condition to see if they had any clinical trials going on out here. And didn't see
Yeah.
any, but the number of clinical trials that are going on at any given moment is just absolutely outstanding.
Mm-hmm. If
It's,
there's
it's
a
incredible.
if there's an illness, there's somebody that wants to cure it.
And there's somebody that's trying to figure it out.
Yeah.
That wants to know why. Why is this happening the way that it is?
Mm-hmm. And that's how we got a cure for sickle cell.
Yep, exactly.
I love it. So let's talk about Joe Rogan again. How about that?
Oh God. All right,
Well,
let's talk about Joe Rogan.
well, Joe Rogan said he was on his show, and Dr. Gupta was on there, to dispel some misinformation that might have been out there. And Joe Rogan said that he actually tried getting the vaccine before he got COVID, and that ivermectin was, yes, a part of his regimen, and that he thought that people should get the vaccine and then get sick because then they would have all types of immunity. And Dr. Gupta said, that's not a great idea. But apparently, the Don Lemon decided to take it further, in the Don Lemon sort of way. And I think he got the story wrong. I keep hearing this and thinking Joe Rogan is this right wing, just weirdo that's an anti vaxxer. But then when I read the full stories, what I realize is he's just a normal guy that tried everything like everybody else.
Yeah, and I don't know what the story is behind why he didn't get the vaccine beforehand.
He
You
said
know,
it was scheduling, just scheduling. He wanted to get it in Las Vegas, and then his scheduling didn't allow it.
so and I think I think that's one of the more important things that people need to understand too. It's like, yes, Joe, we think of Joe Rogan as, having this, lifestyle that he can just pick and choose when he gets to do things. The dude's scheduled
Right.
out.
Mm-hmm.
He's got a lot of commitments. Now, what I will say is that, in the case of Joe Rogan, and this is stuff that's being published right now, is that people who have had COVID and then go get the vaccine afterwards and do the full regimen, they end up creating super antibodies.
Exactly.
And what they're finding out is that the people who are getting the two dose regimens are actually getting antibodies for more than just COVID. They're getting them for other diseases too.
Cool. And
So,
Joe,
with Joe Rogan and it's like, I really think that the ivermectin thing is more overblown than it should be
of
in
course
both
it is.
categories.
Of course it is. It was part of, he also took monoclonal antibodies, right? So he had a regimen of things. And he's like us. He's just discussing things. And he had a professional on to give the answer to his response, right? We should do
Mhm.
both. That's not a great idea. Okay, but we talked about it. And that's what we need to do. We can't just hide our
Mhm.
thoughts and then not have them questioned. So I'm not opposed to Joe Rogan, other than he's got a 3-hour podcast and I'm never going to listen.
I think for me, it just depends on the person that Joe Rogan has on. Sometimes he has on some really interesting people. Like he's
Hmm.
had Neil deGrasse Tyson on there a few times. He's had a couple other people that I'm really, that are really fun to listen to.
Yeah.
Sometimes he's had some people on there where I'm like, wow, oof, that's not somebody who I would pick to have on my podcast, but whatever.
Hmm. But there's the thing is like you don't know until you get them on because a lot of the people he gets are celebrities and you only see them for 3 to 5 minutes at a time, right? Like you never talk to a celebrity for 3 hours, but when you do, you find out, wow, that wasn't the conversation I wanted.
hmm Well, like when everybody blew up at that freaking Elon Musk went on Joe Rogan's podcast and smoked a freaking blunt, and everybody was
Right.
like, "Oh my God, this head of a tech company, he's smoking the devil's lettuce," and I'm like, "So
Hmm.
who cares?
Who cares?
Who
He had to step
cares?"
aside, didn't he? Because of
Well,
that?
he didn't. No, there was some other stock stuff, and he
Okay.
didn't actually step aside. He just changed his title, and now basically to fuck with the feds. And I'm like, you know what? Okay, I can accept that.
I got you.
I mean, I have problems with a lot of his other ideas and things that he does, but whatever. I'm
Hmm.
always good. I'm always here for a good fuck the feds.
And it takes everybody in the spectrum to make the world go round. We need the Elon Musks, and I don't like him either. I'm not a fan of Elon Musk.
Well, and that's just it. Is that I guarantee you that some of the people who've done world changing things probably not necessarily a fan. And I can go back to
Yeah,
Franklin Roosevelt. Franklin Roosevelt and his ideas on modernizing the American power system and his
right.
ideas on putting the American people back to work after the Great Depression and creation of Social Security as a safety net because of what we all saw during the Great Depression.
Mm,
Dude literally had freaking internment camps for Japanese people. You want to talk about fucking
right.
awful?
Right.
You
That's
want to
what I
talk about
think.
fucking awful? It's like, this is where one of those things where it's like, look, I guarantee you the people that you look up to the most have some really shitty stuff in their past, and some people are just better at hiding it than others.
Like it's whitewashed over history.
Hmm
Like I remember we were talking about Trump and how, his business, his economy was strong. And I think to myself, his policies were still shit because he stopped aid to the Meso southern region, built a wall, and separated families. Like, so who fuck your economy? You know what I
You know,
mean?
and that's always the tough part is that you get to, you get to understand, like, just because somebody does something good, that doesn't mean they didn't do something equally as terrible, and vice versa,
Right.
and you just have to try and wade through. It's like, just because a bad person has a good idea doesn't mean that you shouldn't be like, all right, let's look at this good idea and work with it.
Right. Yeah, Democrats never look reflectingly at what like Donald Trump did that people liked. So
Nope.
I was thinking about it. Donald Trump says, I'm rich because I didn't let the government push me around. You're not rich because you did. Elect me and I'll create a government that stays out of your way. Does that sound right? Although he's only targeting it to the Caucasians. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
everything I'm trying to examine everything through that perspective this week. I just came up with that yesterday and I was like, yeah, he's trying to get rid of immigrants so that white people can live their dream. But he doesn't realize that a lot of white people are already living their dreams in a simple manner. We don't all need golden toilets. Some of us just need a rooster that crows 6 hours a day.
Right. Or, someone that we just need someone that can come and work our field or our
Mm-hmm.
orchard or whatever have you. And that's the that's one of the biggest issues is that policies have sucked so much donkey dick. And then, you look at what the Democrats are supposedly going to come in and do and fix it, and they haven't done a damn thing. Democrats are great at saying, look at how fucked up things are. We're
Mm-hmm.
not going to do that. But then you get them in office, and then it's more like, we're not going to do that. We're just not going to do anything until becomes a really bad idea. Then we're going to do that.
Right. Yep. I mean, they're talking about Build Back Better, how it's going to transform everything, but then they're saying, well, we're going to cut it in half. Well, how, and you're still promising transformation? Like, with half the money that you wanted? Oh, we're going to go back and get it later. Oh, you're going to go back and do the rest later. Okay. And it's just this we're gonna. And I had an uncle that used to do that. And I hated him. I hated him because I couldn't
Mhm.
count on him. We're gonna help you. You weren't gonna help me originally. Why did I think you were gonna help me in the future? You know what I mean?
Welcome to Democrats. We're going to help you. Oh yeah, by the way, I'm a little too busy. I can't help you.
Yeah.
Sorry.
They won't let me. I want to help you, but they won't let me. Give me more money and I'll have more power.
Yeah, no, no.
Yeah. So we buried the lead in our Texas story. I always want to get a good Texas story in, and I know this one you
Ooh.
love, right? So Southlake, Texas school leader tells teachers to balance Holocaust books with opposing views. You like that? It's been all over the news, and I picked this early. I picked this early, and then I saw it on a bunch of different news stations. So I don't know. Is there an opposing view that we should teach about the
Nope.
Holocaust?
Nope. There's
No.
not. No, the only view is that the Holocaust happened and that, kicking Nazi ass is an American tradition. That's
Okay.
literally, like, if you want to go straight up red, white, and blue, that's literally it. The Holocaust happened. Our fucking soldiers found these camps, and they were insanely awful.
Mm,
And kicking Nazi ass is pretty much an American tradition. You
it's
know,
the best. It's the best.
it's one of our better traditions.
Mm.
Somehow we haven't kept up on. It's as American as baseball and apple pie. Taking a baseball bat to a Nazi.
Yep. Watch the Blues Brothers. Yep.
And that's what's absolutely insane. There is no opposing view. It's
Okay.
like, okay, if this is what we're going to do, if we're going to have allow a quote unquote an opposing view on everything, all right, then it's time to have opposing views on some things that they're not going to like.
Okay. I like that.
Like like they're going to have to get real used to teaching about Satanism.
Satanism. Oh my God. Well,
Okay, like I'll play this game. Let's do opposing views. Let's have Satanism be a curriculum in high school as well. Because every school learns about different religions, but you know what we didn't learn about? Satanism. And we barely talked about the Quran or Buddhism or Judaism. We talked a little bit about Judaism because, Judaism actually moved into Christianity, so you at least have that connection. But there was no way in hell we were going to talk about Islam, very much. It was more like, yeah, Islam's a thing, it's over here. Uh, we we kind of got a couple of things out of it, but yeah, no, not important. Don't need to know about it until suddenly a couple of towers fell in New York City, and suddenly now it's just Islam bad. So, I don't, if there is no opposing view on the Holocaust, there is no balancing that view. Um, I mean, in reality, it's like, okay, I guess if we're going to talk about that, then here's what a balanced discussion on the Second World War would look like. It's like, okay, so if the Holocaust gets an opposing view, then it's time for Pearl Harbor to get an opposing view on
Yeah,
how American imperialism was affecting the Japanese. You want to know how many people are going to listen to that horse shit?
not too many.
Not in this
I
country.
tried doing that actually. I had a Pearl Harbor series where I based it on the Japanese perspective. And I even used Japanese titles and descriptions. And Japan loved it. And I thought that was amazing because we were both finally getting on the same page instead of being like, we hate you for what you did. We're like, hey, we all had a part in this. Like Japan has an area of cherry trees that are grown for every American soldier that died. You don't
Mhm.
know that. You don't know this stuff, right? They care just as much. They honor our fallen like we don't honor theirs, you know?
And that's just it. Is that I like I am all in favor of teaching people a holistic perspective of history.
Yeah,
There is more than just the victor side. Absolutely. But the
absolutely.
idea, the idea that there is a quote unquote other side. Well, we learn about the other side. It's called Nazi Germany, and their view was they
Hmm.
saw the Jewish people as a group of people that need to be exterminated. We teach that already.
Right. We do the rise and fall of the Nazi Empire. You can't go on Hulu without seeing 10 documentaries about it, you know?
So the question is whether or not you're giving credence to those ideas, and the answer is we shouldn't be.
Mm-mm.
We kind of fought a war about it and won. We shouldn't be giving
Right.
credence to Nazi ideology. There was nothing to give credence to.
It failed. Dramatically, it failed. But here's an idea. Why don't we broaden the perspective? Like 6 million Jews died, right? But so did gypsies. They almost wiped the gypsies out. Disabled people, gay people, black people, anybody that they encountered that wasn't like them, they worked them to death or killed them in a gas chamber. They took our soldiers and would march them in fields, pouring cold water over them in the winter so that they would die so they could save the gas for other people. Like a lot of people died in the Holocaust, 6 million Jews, but a whole bunch of other people were in there as
Hmm.
well. And
An additional
I,
5 million other different races and ethnicities and backgrounds.
right. And I think that that's something that needs to be known. You know, the Holocaust wasn't just about Jewish death. And we have an episode, by the way, of actual footage of the Allied forces liberating Krakow, I think it is. And they get the soldiers out. And there's actually an interview at the gate, you know, and they're talking to what these soldiers went through and saw. So if you think the Holocaust never happened, there's actual audio footage that we have of it. And the people that they found were of all races. They
Mm.
just weren't German Aryan, you know what I mean?
Well, and the other thing too that people might not realize is that Eisenhower demanded that this get recorded because it was so horrific
Hmm.
that he himself thought nobody would believe this if they didn't see it.
In the future, right?
Yep,
Yeah. And that's why we had the Nuremberg trials,
partially.
partially. Well, we had to have them.
We had to have them, but we also needed to have video of what these camps were. And
Hmm.
that's just it, is that there's not just American footage, there's Soviet footage.
Yeah.
Like these camps existed. This treatment existed. Now I'm not saying that the Soviets were any better. They just did things differently.
At the
If you want
time,
to
they weren't any worse. We were just
no,
some fledgling nations just trying to make it. Like
no,
Russia, Russia didn't know they got super attacked by the Nazis because there was like land they could get there. Nazis didn't come to us like they did in masses. Like they wanted the Soviet Empire, and they a lot of people died. A lot of people died in that part of the war.
yep, yep.
I wouldn't have picked on Russia. I would have left them the fuck alone if I was the Germans. You know what I mean?
I wouldn't have fought a war on two fronts,
I know.
but decisions were made.
Decisions were made. Decisions were made. Well, thanks for being here, Jeffrey. I appreciate you.
Absolutely.
Thank you, and come back next Thursday for another episode of Public Access America. Yay, welcome back to Public Access America. I have some fun stuff to talk about. Not really fun stuff.
Ooh.
Let's see.
Oh.
Should we talk about? Oh, hey, you mentioned something, by the way, and I couldn't wrap my head around it. You had mentioned that Joe Biden wants to have access to every $600 transaction in a bank account.
Mm-hmm.
And I did find that story, and the Treasury Secretary says it's any fluctuation of $600 in a bank account at the beginning and end of a year.
Yep.
I still don't like it.
Uh-huh.
Like, if you're going after millionaires because they're putting money in and out, then why is a $600 transaction up your ass?
Is this a millionaire or a billionaire?
Is this a millionaire or a billionaire? So, like, it wasn't every transaction what I originally thought, but even fact checking and hearing it, like I heard it on a news show. They had the assistant treasury secretary on or something to explain it. And I
Mm-hmm.
just was like, that doesn't mean it's better. Like, we're constantly saying if you make a law to trap one group, it's going to be used to trap another group, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's how Jim Crow worked. And now it sounds like the Treasury just wants the ability to go after anybody,
Mm-hmm.
including me.
Mm-hmm.
I don't like that.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that's, and they've been trying to revise that in a lot of different ways. And
Mhm.
the reality is that any account that had $600 go through it, they want details to be able to tax them.
Right. Well, they want how much you had in your account at the beginning of the year and how much you had in your account at the end of the year. And if it's over $600 plus, then it's going to kick out and be reviewed additionally. And that's kind of freaky to me. You know what I mean?
Which is like absolutely nothing. Like
Right.
that's insane.
It's insane.
So, yeah,
Okay.
the way that they're doing this is basically, they sat down and they did, like I said, and millionaires and billionaires will pay for it is starting to sound an awful lot like, and Mexico will pay for it just for the left.
I didn't think of
No,
that.
they
You could
didn't,
be,
and no, it won't.
they're saying this could raise $7 trillion. And I'm like, off of $600 transactions? This is crazy, right?
Because we're gonna get it from people who don't have any money.
Right. And then what happens when a Republican is in office and he decides, well, we're not going to look at the rich people's taxes like we're doing, like we did under Trump, right? We're going to look at poor people's taxes. And what if they go back to that? Now they have the ability to get into my bank account, whereas they didn't before. You're not making money from billionaires. You're putting my accounts at risk for future administrations.
Yep, bingo.
Fucking bingo. Speaking of bingo, states spent over $89 million in COVID incentives, like the lotteries and stuff. And research shows during that time frame, the amount of people that got their vaccines because of it was next to zero.
Yep.
So giving somebody a gun or $1 million isn't going to get people vaccinated.
Nope. I
No.
mean, it was a feel good story for those of us who had already gotten vaccinated, but
Mhm.
the issue at hand was never about it was never about whether or not, this incentive would work.
Right.
What it boiled down to is they needed to hear their own people talking about vaccines and how they work and how
Right.
effective they are. And they didn't do that. They didn't do
Mm-mm.
that.
No, it didn't create a conversation that they thought it would create.
No. Well, it was never going to create a conversation. That's the funny part about this.
Hmm.
It was never going to create a conversation. The only thing that it was going to do was reward those of us that were early adopters.
Not even, because it came out after I got my vaccination. And I was kind of butthurt about this. Like I could have gotten $100 if I
See,
had waited.
right, and every state did it differently. For us in Washington, it was, if you had it registered in the system.
Gotcha.
So
Okay.
like it just, it did not do what it needed to do. And what needed to be done was the people who were experiencing hesitancy needed to have someone in their camp sit down with them and say, look, I get the issues that you're facing. I get the concerns that you're having.
Yeah.
Let's actually have the conversation and do this right. And that didn't happen. And instead you just got more of, well, just the Democrats, rewarding Democrats for being Democrats. And it's like, yeah, our reward was not dying of a preventable disease and maybe
Yep.
an Xbox.
Maybe. I would have killed for an Xbox. That sounds great. No, that
Series
just
X, yeah.
it's gonna dumbfound historians to look back and realize that like 70 million people just didn't get the vaccine. It's just gonna dumbfound historians, you know?
Absolutely, it will. And what it's basically, I don't know what to tell people other than it's like, at a certain point, what's going to happen is there's going to be people who have had COVID. They're not going to recover the way that they think that they're going to recover. And they're
Hmm.
going to blame it on the Democrats for whatever fucking reason. And it's not any of their faults. It's like you deciding that you thought you had an immune system is not the Democrats, playing merry hell with you.
Right.
Trump Trump cut the red tape to get a vaccine, and it was developed and they started putting it out under Trump's watch.
Yep.
Period. End of story.
And it's been tested over 1 billion times.
And then, Joe Biden ramped up the ability for the vaccine to get dispersed,
Right.
which I
I
don't
have.
necessarily think that Trump would have had any different plan necessarily.
He didn't have a plan. He was just leaving it up to states to request as much as they wanted. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and and that was just it. Is that Biden's like, look, we're going to put this in every grocery store that has a pharmacy. Period. End of
Hmm.
story. You need to be able to just go walk into your grocery store and get your shot, and that's what happened with me. I was able to
Right.
walk into the grocery store and get a shot in my arm. Great, fantastic.
But if five weirdos are telling you as your president that herd immunity is going to work just as well as vaccinated herd immunity, you're like, okay, so there's no big rush. Either they get sick, like the Joe Rogan thought, either they get sick and get the antibodies, or they get the vaccine and get the antibodies. So Trump, I think, was a little naive in being talked to by people that were a little naive.
Oh, absolutely. So, and I mean, even when you look at what herd immunity looks like, I mean, even just look at something like the chickenpox pre-vaccine.
Hmm.
You'd think that at some point enough people would have had the chickenpox that the chickenpox wouldn't have been a thing, but every year we still had the chickenpox.
Right. And I'm not making excuses for Donald Trump. What I'm saying is trust but verify. Like even if
N- There
if,
was
if you're
no
being told
verify.
some if you're being told something, you need to do your own work. Like I know presidents read all night long. Like they have so many briefs to get through. And to think that Donald Trump didn't go to opposing opinions, like they always said, right? Like they always said Donald Trump got like to get two sides in a room and let them battle it out. Where was the opposing view to anti-vaxxing?
There
To
wasn't,
there wasn't.
because that's the thing about when you surround yourself with your sounding board,
Right.
as a cabinet. Like he was looking for yes men in his
Yep.
cabinet.
There was no what they said, putting two people in the room. There wasn't. There was give me my what I want to hear or get fired.
Hmm.
Yeah.
And that's what happened consistently.
I was watching a show, Ancient Aliens, of course, but it was about presidents that have, witnessed UFOs, and Ronald Reagan witnessed a UFO, and they said his one of his aides said we had to at every point get him to not talk about it. Like, all the time we had to keep him on message and not make him talk about aliens. And I thought about Donald Trump, like he didn't aides didn't do that for him. Like they were like, don't talk about that, and he was like, yep, that's all I'm talking about then. And that's how I
Mhm.
know that aliens don't exist, because Donald Trump never told us they did.
Yeah, if he would have gotten any information that we had aliens or alien technology, we would have
Yeah,
never heard the end of it.
right. I mean, if there was aliens, he would have had an attack come so he could have stayed president. That's the truth.
Or what did Stephen Hawking say? Is that if aliens existed, if we had aliens here on the planet,
Mhm.
and you would supposedly have all of these governments that know about it, that means that all of these governments are doing a better job at keeping one secret than they have ever done at keeping any secret, period.
Right.
It's
That's
like
hilarious.
don't get me wrong, like, do I believe aliens exist? Absolutely. Do I believe that they've visited here? Doubtful. I want them to in some
Mm,
way, shape, or form. But then again, I've also got are they here to make friends or are they here to gather resources?
right. Nope, I get it.
So,
I love watching those theories, but I'm always like, what are you talking? They always go a bridge too far, you know? Like, okay, you're making sense, and then they jump, and then they go into, was it aliens? There's other theories. It doesn't have to be aliens, you know? Maybe they
mhm.
did dig those rocks out of chicken bones and move them with a bunch of slave labor. You don't know.
Well, and that's one of those things where it's like, some people have a really hard time accepting the fact that a primitive group of people could have come up with a system that worked so effectively.
Mm,
It's like also too, when you think about timelines, when you've got millennia, you can do a lot of things over the course of, you know,
right.
what was it? I want to say like the Egyptian empires were like somewhere on the order of like 1500, BC to, right up until Roman rule.
Yeah.
They were around for a long time.
They've been around 5,000 years now. So whatever that
So
means. And
yeah,
they're saying that the pyramids were actually based on people that were there before the Egyptians. So you're always learning more
mm,
things, and I think that's fascinating. Like I love those. I love megalithic structures. I just think they're so cool. I don't have to analyze how they were made. I think they're so cool that they're there, and they're all over the world. You can go anywhere and just see megalithic structures. And I like, we all brag about Stonehenge, but come on, that's like the least amazing one, you know?
right. There's so many good ones out there.
Hmm. So Jeffrey,
Yeah.
prison said it was COVID isolation, but the incarcerated people describe it as torture.
Mm.
So how do you take like the whole and suddenly say it's medical? I just wanted to get the story out there so people started thinking, what did happen in our prisons during COVID? You know what I mean?
Well, so this is a tough one because
It is.
I know people who work in the prisons, and I mean to tell you, COVID was ripping through there at a rate you wouldn't believe.
Mm-hmm.
Almost, it was pretty much like ripping through the nursing homes, like when it first showed up.
Right, but nobody cared. Nobody was like rushing to get the vaccine out for our elderly and incarcerated.
Right. And I get it. Like, you know, they had to keep people away from each other because, like, if you think that a prison hospital has any sort of capacity whatsoever,
None at all.
it's pretty much next to zero.
Yeah.
And if they require anything more than, a quick checkup and a bottle of ibuprofen, they
Hmm.
have to send them out, period.
Right.
And if they don't have anywhere to send them to, what the hell are you going to do?
Right.
So
Well,
I get why prisoners think it was torture, because isolation has been considered to be torture.
agreed. Yeah.
Does that mean that prisoners should have been fully isolated, or should they have had someone that they could buddy up with? Maybe, unless you've got got some real violent criminals, and you buddy one person up with another person, and when you show up in the cell the next morning, you've only got one person in the cell and a corpse.
Hmm. On the other
Like,
hand, if your prison is full of 500 inmates, 300 of whom are nonviolent offenders, maybe you could let them out, put them on home arrest, like they did Michael Cohen. They did that in other prisons with low
yep,
level offenders. They
yep.
just let them go home and put them on house arrest. But I mean, I see that above putting them in a hole that you considered
Hmm.
torture at one point, but now you're saying is medically relevant. That's my issue. You didn't improve it. It's still a hole. And I
Oh,
see.
it's still terrible. Like, I mean, we've known that isolationism in prison
Hmm.
is actually torture. We've known that since, what is it, Penhurst?
Right.
Or was it Penhurst or was it Eastern State? There was one that where basically it was out in Pennsylvania, and it was basically, the idea was it was a Quaker prison, and the idea was is that you were left alone with God in order to get right. And turns out a bunch of people went fucking crazy.
Hmm.
It's like, we've known that it's been that solitary confinement in a lot of ways is torture.
Yeah.
Um, but at the same time too, like, you know, people also have to understand that some people are just so violent that you don't have any choice, period, in the story. Like, they get
Right.
around anybody else, they're straight up just going to do things that, that somebody else is going to have to clean up after.
Hmm. Well, I totally get that. And like, I'm not opposed to that. It's just if you had gotten rid of the low lining offenders, you might have had room to separate, socially distance, and have a. The problem is they didn't do all they could. They didn't. You can't look back and at the prison system and say, well, they tried everything and failed. They tried nothing and failed, and that's my issue. And it's because people don't matter. You know,
Well, and
those people don't
those
matter.
those that group of people, like, well, and that's the other thing too, is that everybody did it differently by state too. Like, here
That's true.
we sent home low level offenders.
Hmm. But if you're a
You know,
for-profit prison system, you're not looking to get rid of these people.
absolutely not.
Mm-mm.
Nope, that's not going to happen.
Right.
So, I mean, that's where you have to look at the system and decide, what it is that you want to accomplish and what you're deeming as a violent offense. I'm sorry, but putting people in jail because they're substance abusers is not the answer. It's like,
Right.
if they're on substances and committing like DV or murders or rapes or anything like that, yeah, okay, sure, you got
Mhm.
violent offense. But if these people are just, fucking drug addicts and substance abusers, and your only solution to them is to throw them in jail, then
Right.
gonna have to go with no. That's definitely not gonna help your case at all.
A
And in
lot of
fact,
people get busted for petty offenses, but then the drugs make it a felony.
mhm. And then on top of that, it's like, great. So now you've put people into what is essentially a traumatic experience and expect them to come out of it being clean and sober.
Right.
Gotta go with nope. That's probably not the way that that works.
Mm-mm. I mean, not only do we have to rethink our prison system and our criminal justice system, but we really have to think about the treatment and gathering of the people that we're trying to shove in there. And we talk about that all the time, but I want to make sure it stays on the table. Like, prisoners are people too.
Mhm.
Somebody that does a violent crime, there's a reason they did it. It's there's something in them, and I think we need to learn what that is instead of just considering the person garbage. We might not be
Mhm.
able to fix the person, but we'll be able to learn from them, and in a good system we can give them more and more outlets of education so that they can continue growing as a person, even if they're a violent offender.
Well, and the reality is that you might not ever be able to rehabilitate a violent offender, but
Mhm.
you might be able to find out where the catalyst was and prevent others from becoming violent offenders.
Exactly. Right. But we don't have a prison system built that way.
We have Department of Punishments. What are you talking about? It's not
Right.
Department of Corrections, because
Hmm.
clearly we're not about correcting people, getting them back into society. We're about punishing them and making sure they can't be in society.
Right. And once you get past like Moses's 10 commandments, everything else is just to put people, keep people in a
Pretty,
prison system. You know what
I
I
mean,
mean?
not wrong.
No, that's sad. And I just heard a story today in Tennessee. A judge, an independent judge, they started They're locking kids up for minor infractions for like months. I think it was 291 years in this past year of sentences for kids that are like swearing or ditching class or something. This judge is just locking them up. I don't have any information on it. I just heard it as I was coming in here, but it attaches to this. Like it's a they're seeing it as a for-profit juvenile system in Tennessee, and Tennessee actually awarded $11 million in compensations because of this, and it's still going.
Yeah, that's a terrible decision.
Yeah, yeah.
Like, if your answer to getting kids to go to school is to throw them in jail, yeah, that's
Tough.
definitely not going to work. Because let's think about this logically for, with one brain cell for half a second.
Right.
What is prison ripe with? Gangs.
Gangs, violent.
Guess what kids are going to do in order to make sure that they stay alive in a prison system? Affiliate with a gang.
You have to.
Yay. All you've done is just made sure that kids are now affiliating with groups that you
Hmm.
don't want them to affiliate with. You've solved the. No, you didn't. You fucking
No.
morons.
But what you did is create something that you can consider a scapegoat later, right? Like you
Oh, no, they
create
won't.
something like as an adult, you can say, look, that's why they're in prison because they're bad, not saying, hey, we made them bad as children.
Or finding out, hey, what was going on that, the kid was missing class.
Mm-hmm.
That's just it is that if you don't have a consistent parental figure that can get you to class, or if you don't have a consistent way to get to school, or if you're struggling just at home and trying to, just remain functional, like
Right.
everybody seems to think that when it comes to kids and behavior, the answer is punishment. And yes, in certain circumstances, punishment is absolutely appropriate. But what people are failing to do is sit down and realize there's more than one way to work with a kid. Every
Mm-hmm.
kid needs something a little bit different to get them on a what you would call a straight and normal. Every
Right.
kid has different needs. How do you know that this kid is just struggling to function? Like when they get to class, they're just struggling because there's too much going on and it just drives them crazy.
Yep.
How do you know that that's not the issue? How do you know that, they can't get to school because they don't have consistency in either, getting to school from a parent? They don't
Mm-hmm.
have parents home, they don't have food at home, they can't get themselves out of bed, they're, whatever it is, or they're living such a destitute life at home that this kid is literally doing whatever it takes to bring money home to put food on the table,
Right.
because
Just
that's
surviving every day, not thinking about a week, a month, or a future.
right. So the fact of the matter is that if your simplistic answer is to throw kids in jail and that ought to fix it,
Mm-hmm.
man, what you have done is created far more problems than you will ever understand.
Right. That's not sparing the rod to spoil the child. You know what I mean?
No, that's spoiling the child, so that way you can give them the rod later.
Right. Um, there's this theory in education to where resources are diverted to the people with the most potential, and the people that determine the people with the most potential are generally Caucasian and see it in Caucasian. Like disabled people aren't worth the resources, right? Black people, they're already broken, so they're not worth the resources. Latinos, they're always going to be Latino. You can't educate a Latino to be white. So I think I think there's a disparity there in what we see potential in. I think of James Baldwin, and I think to myself, what if he didn't get an education? What if he just stayed a backwards cabbage picking black guy? And that scares me.
And I
Would
think what it comes down to is that you've got some old school ideologies when it comes to teaching, that it's like,
mm-hmm,
the kid who's gifted, you need to spend all the time in the world on them. I was
right,
one of those kids, and I hated that,
right,
because it's like, look, I'm here because I understand this stuff. This is literally second nature to me. It's like, focus on these guys because, I'm doing this by myself. I'm fine.
right.
I'm fine.
Yep. I
And this was
tested.
and this was in a and this was in the pre technology available era, yeah,
Hmm.
I had a computer in my homeroom and I could use it to look up different things, but it wasn't like it is now where like literally like if I'm so far advanced, my teacher could literally be like, all right, jump on the computer, jump on your Chromebook that you get, and
Hmm.
you're going to go do all these lessons. This group of kids, you're going to go do we're going to work with you. Or flat out, like my science teacher would pair us up with kids who weren't quite as gifted. So like for my
Right.
biology class, it was like, you know one kid, he was a C average student, always.
Hmm.
But when we got into doing dissection, um I he was far more skilled with a scalpel than I was. And
Nice.
being blind in my left eye, fine motor skills definitely a problem. But he didn't understand where these muscles were, or he couldn't figure that out. So for
Right.
me, like I could easily understand the biology of the animal and show him where this was at. So literally, he did the knife work, and I sat there with him and I showed him where everything was, and he did all of the cutting and the labeling and all of that.
Nice.
My science teacher pulls me aside and he says, "Look, the system that I've had in place, I should be docking you for not also doing the knife work." It's like, but the fact of the matter is, this kid has an A in this class, and he has never had an A in any class whatsoever.
Nice.
It's like, that's because what I'm doing is working. It's like, I don't question whether or not I can cut something up. He happens to be a lot better at it. He
Mhm.
happens to be able to focus and have the finer points and the finer cuts than I do. And guess what? I'm going over this with him. I know where this stuff is. I can see it perfectly fine. He has been able to learn this stuff because I'm helping him get in there and see where it's at. And he's doing the work. It's like I can understand where this is just by looking at it. He is doing it and learning it.
Yeah.
The kid got an A in that class. That was the first time he'd ever gotten an A in any class,
That's so
like
cool.
especially any advanced class.
And you don't know what that sparks then. You don't know what he'll go
Right.
on to do.
Or and that's just it is that sometimes pairing someone up with a gifted kid, that was the thing is that it wasn't just, for me, it wasn't just me being like, here, do this, do that, and do the other. you know yeah, I understood it and I learned it very easily and I aced everything anyways. But I was also teaching somebody how to do something, and so it was reinforcing everything that I was learning very easily and helping this person learn. Just because you have a gifted kid in your class doesn't mean you necessarily need to separate them. What that means is that you have an asset that can help other kids. And I constantly did that. I did that in algebra. I did that, and I did that in, yeah, so I did that in algebra because I had a bunch of juniors and seniors and I was a sophomore. And I taught them how to do all of this algebra. Um, I did that in any number of my classes. Being a gifted kid and being isolated is the worst, because once I got into classes where I was the only student, I fell off because it was like I didn't have something there to drive me. It was just me alone with a
Yeah.
book, and
Right.
that was a curse in and of itself.
That's the
I didn't
story of my
have
education, so I get
I didn't
that.
have competition. Or someone that I could help.
Hmm.
And so
That's
it's just like, what am I going to do? It's like, could I sit down and give it my all? Sure, but that just wasn't who I was. And
yeah.
it was just like,
Why?
and so I had languished, and
Mhm.
so being the person who is gifted is only as good as their ability to apply it and the ways in which they can apply it. And if they can't, and if they're not doing it by themselves, figure out how they can help someone else with it. And I
Agreed.
guarantee you that you will find that it's so much easier to teach and spread knowledge by using, kids who are literally no different than their peers around them, other than their ability to understand the information.
Right. Yeah. If half the kids were bright and half the kids weren't, they could work together on a test. You know what I mean? They would average each other out. But we separate. We say the gifted go into different classes so that we can keep the remedial kids in remedial classes without slowing down the smart kids. But I think it is. I think it's a large group gathered together. You know,
Mm,
I never understood. Like, I took political science. I didn't care. I didn't consumer math. I didn't care. I never understood how it related to my life. Algebra. Nobody sat there and taught me that, you know? And
Mhm.
so I never saw why I needed. I tested as a genius. I just applied myself like crap. Nobody taught me how to apply myself, and I saw no reason to do it, you know?
I was called the lackadaisical genius
Me
by a
too.
couple of my teachers. It's like they knew I was smart and they knew that I could handle pretty much anything they got thrown at me. I
Hmm.
just didn't care enough in a lot of cases. I was
Yeah.
more interested in either sleeping or fucking around.
Exactly, because I don't know. I get what you're saying already. Why do I got to be here? I had a teacher. He told me, if you just come to my class, I'll pass you. And I was like, "Ah."
I don't want
So
that.
I don't. I just so I. Yeah, I guess that's
So,
amazing. But
yep.
it's how you teach kids. You can't put us all in a box like that, and you need to start taking prisoners out of the boxes.
Mhm.
Like I don't like that. I don't, you think to yourself, if you're going to go to prison, you want solitary confinement, but prisoners, I don't want them in it. You know what I mean?
No, you don't.
Yeah.
You
Well,
really
I
don't.
think I think what I'd like is to talk to some prisoners and find out what is good and bad. You know what I mean? Like I don't know. I shouldn't speak from this like activist sort of pious
Well,
sort of like I know. I don't know. I've never been to prison. I've only seen TV shows, so I
well,
just want the best for a human. All I can do is say humans need better.
and that's just it is that you can't even look at it from a what should prison have been. You have to
Hmm.
look at it in terms of what should prison have prepared you for when you got out.
Yeah.
What should you have had for resources once you got out?
Hmm.
What should society have done once you got out?
Right.
Because here's the thing is that even still you can do all of the reform work necessary. And if you're still not allowed to actively participate in society as a whole,
Right.
on the whole, it doesn't matter. Like all of that work that you can do but have no opportunities when you come out the other side means jack shit.
That's right. Bernie Sanders said it cost 85,000 to house an inmate. It costs 35,000 to send them to college. So why aren't our prisons more like college? I mean, you still have the hardcore offenders and the federal max securities and stuff, but for your basic person that's just gone the wrong direction in life, why can't our prisons have a rehabilitation center attached to it, class mentality or a trade school mentality? Why can't a prison in Missouri teach somebody how to fix a tractor instead of how to make a license plate? You know what I mean?
I can't, and if you're going to do that, then yes, sure, there has to be some probation to make sure that everybody's keeping up. Like the idea of probation should be that, you know, you can't expect people to come out and be 100% successful.
Right.
People are going to fail. And if your goal is to get people back into a jailhouse, probation oftentimes just exactly that.
Right.
But if you can help continue to set someone up to succeed, say, look, I get why you did that, but you can't do that if you want to continue to succeed. If you want to
Right.
get away from this, you can't be doing this,
Hmm.
you know?
But what if probation was a classroom instead of a meeting? You know, furthering your education once you got out of prison and attending class once a week, that's your probation. You
And
show up, you're fine, you're good, you pass the tests, we're good. You know what I mean?
or probation, like I like the idea of probation as a classroom, but and
Hmm.
it's just that, prior to your probation class, it's a hey, what are you missing in order to be successful? What are you
Right.
needing
Home
in
ec,
order
what do you need?
home ec,
Consumer math, the basics. Yeah.
yeah, what do we need to figure out? Because we shouldn't have people continuously on this, stuck in the system, even once they're done. Like
Right.
if they are out of prison, the idea should be that they have served their time and
Hmm.
that you're checking up on them to make sure that they are successful in staying out of prison. Period.
Right.
End of story.
I
Like
think
I don't like probation the way that it is. It's
No.
like, because if you're convinced that they're not ready to be out yet, then they shouldn't be out. Period. End of story.
Right. Right.
But if they are ready to be out, then what you need to be doing is you need to be working with them to make sure that they are developing the skills, the tools, and the connections that they need in order to stay out.
That's a good point. Why do we have probation, supervision, halfway houses? If they're not ready to leave, they shouldn't leave.
Yeah, if you're deeming them not safe enough to
Right.
be able to make decisions on their own, then they probably shouldn't be out. That
Right.
said, though, like what does that really do though? It's like, okay, you're out, don't screw up.
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
Here's
you
20
screwed up,
bucks. Yep.
bam, you're back in jail. Whereas it's like, hey, we don't want you back here. It's like,
Right.
we don't, I mean, that should be the answer, is that we don't want you back here.
But my question is like everybody that commits a crime wants to know why they did, why they're in that situation, how to get out of it. So you never know what education is going to create an epiphany about their circumstances. A murderer might take a philosophical class and realize that, wow, what I did was immoral, right?
Mhm.
And then you bash him in the head and kill him.
There's that.
But that's what happened to Jeffrey Dahmer. He's like, I found God. This is great. Oh, I'm such a bad person. And then somebody beat him in the head with a baseball bat. And I was like, thank you. Now he knows what he did was wrong before he died. You know what I mean? That's what I hope is that people learn their mistakes, learn from their mistakes.
I mean, that's what any of us hope is that there is that the a kid learns from their mistakes, that a person learns
Hmm.
from their mistakes. But the reality is that
Yeah.
unless you're saying this is the mistake and this is how you avoid making it in the future, and here's how we set you up for success so you don't make that mistake again. If you're not doing that, then none of it matters. None of it
Right.
matters in the least.
Well,
You have to give people the tools that they need in order to not screw up, not just tell
right.
them don't screw up.
Their individual needs, not based on an average. This
Right.
man might need this man might need that. And bleeding hearts, just throwing money at something to solve their conscience doesn't work. We can throw all the money we want at it and give it to people that are going to do the wrong things with it. That doesn't mean you should feel good about that, you know?
Like, give me someone who's busted their ass knowing that they've screwed up,
Hmm.
but is putting in the work to ensure that they don't.
Right.
Not just them being afraid that they're going to screw up, or just giving up and saying, yeah, I'm going to fuck up and I don't care
Hmm.
anymore.
If I'm going to fuck up now or fuck up later, I might as well save myself the stress, right?
Exactly. Whereas it's like, the idea should be that, if you're out, you're out.
Right.
And we're going to make sure that you get the tools, and you're not going back in unless you commit another crime.
Right. Right.
And if you commit another crime, okay, that's a different story. If you're committing violent crimes, I should say, that's a different story.
Hmm.
But if you're in the least bit concerned that they're going to fuck up and you're not giving them the tools to succeed, I mean, really, what are you hoping for? What is your hope?
Right.
And I would
I,
say that the system is working as it is designed.
That's the problem is the design. And I think even the most violent of offenders need a continuing education. They need access to the continuing education.
Mhm.
Even if we deem them unsuitable as a human, that doesn't mean that they shouldn't have the availability to continue being a human, you know?
Right. Right.
Yeah, I have this dream of this prison complex that's just like people. There's a prison aspect to it, but there's classes and trade schools and all this stuff with, elementary schools where grown adults can go to learn and advance. And maybe people go there, maybe kids, juveniles go there too. And, it's this great thing. And the further you get up the ladder, the less restraint you have until one day you walk out with a degree. You're like, wow, I didn't even realize I was in prison that whole time. I'm a better person. That's my dream.
Mm. If people can walk out with a degree or a skill that they can immediately walk into another job to,
Right,
absolutely.
right.
And that's the
Exactly.
trick with this is that, I do believe that education should be accessible to all, but the
Hmm.
idea that, I could see where people are going to do the whole, like, if you don't get this degree, you're not getting out of prison.
Right, right.
If
And
you don't
it,
get this trade skill, if you don't get this trade skill certification, you're not getting out of prison. And that's
right.
not the answer either.
No, it isn't, because there's people that aren't going to get out even if they get that degree. And
Right.
there's people that are going to be able to get that degree because they've already learned that stuff.
Exactly. And what it boils down to is that, if they don't have the opportunity to walk out into the world
Mhm.
and,
Right,
be like, yeah, I screwed up. I made some dumb mistakes in my life and I've paid my time for it. And now I'm here to, move past all of that.
right.
It's like I knew some people who were great at what they did, but they decided, they made choices that fucked up their life.
Yeah,
And when they finally got themselves back on solid footing, they couldn't go back to what they were really good at doing.
right. I know people that committed felonies in their 20s that are still living them down in their 50s.
And that's, and unfortunately that shouldn't be a thing. Like if
Mm-mm.
you're actually going to call it the Department of Corrections, then you have to trust that the system
Yeah,
has corrected the behavior and that they are now free to operate within society. Otherwise,
right.
otherwise it's, I would argue that it falls, I would argue that it falls under, the cruel and unusual punishment, that all you're doing is making sure that they are now a slave to the system. An
Hmm.
actual, they're literally that, because slavery is an acceptable punishment
Right.
for crimes.
It's slavery with extra steps. Yep.
Yep.
Most everything is, isn't it? That's what I'm figuring out here.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's my dream. All right. Oh, I kept looking at what time it was and I kept seeing 17, but it's October 17th. The clock's right next to it.
Yep.
All right. I wanted to, oh, okay. Let's get on to the story that I like, because this is our jam, Jeffrey. This one is our jam. Biden,
Biden.
Biden seeks to spearhead new attack on supply chain delays.
Yep.
This is our jam. This is our shit.
Yep.
So he's meeting with corporate leaders and labor leaders to see how we can get this done. Do you have any opening thoughts on this? Have you thought about this at all?
I mean, honestly, the biggest issue that you're going to have is that whatever positions that are going to be necessary to fill,
Mm-hmm.
you got to make sure that they're getting paid at the living wage in order
Nice.
for people to want to take those positions, that they're getting the appropriate benefits that they need in order to take those positions. That and that really, we need to make sure that fundamentally that we're not requiring anything that is above and beyond what is necessary in order to take these positions. You know, it's like, don't get me wrong, I do believe in education, but I don't think somebody needs a 4-year degree in order to do a lot of this stuff.
Right. Well, let's get back. Biden says that the supply chain was disrupted because of the pandemic. Was the pandemic the reason that our supply chains are the way they are right now?
The start, yes. The current, no.
Okay.
So the start of it, yes, because everybody went into lockdown, everybody went home, and
Mm-hmm.
so that slowed everything down, absolutely. And as things have started picking back up, you've got a multitude of different reasons why things aren't picking back up the way that you expect. And
Right.
this is something that has been discussed multiple times in multiple ways. So, for example, everything from, there's the people are being incentivized to stay home because of, whatever unemployment benefits that they got.
Mm-hmm.
People are taking jobs in different sectors because they are not going to bust their ass for less than a minimum,
A
a
living wage,
living
right?
minimum wage. Yeah.
Yep.
And so basically it's incumbent upon those organizations to figure out how to bring in those people. Or you know what, maybe it's that our policies of having immigrants unavailable to us is costing us the ability to get ships unloaded and get shit moving.
I agree. Do you think the Panama blockage had any factor in this?
You mean the Suez blockage?
The Suez, yeah. Sorry about that.
uh I mean, that one did have a 7-day effect, a slowdown.
Hmm.
But no, globally, this is, like the West Coast is just completely backlogged with cargo ships that are needing to be unloaded. In this country, you're facing a shortage of shipping yard workers, and you're facing a shortage of truck drivers and transportation. So
You are
it's more
so
than
ahead of the curve on this story. I love
so
it.
it's more than just, the ships are suddenly flooding in. It's that there's legitimately a loss of there's legitimately a loss of things that are, we're lacking resources to be able to move things around.
Yeah.
Whether it's we don't have enough trains moving goods across the country, or we don't have enough truck drivers. You know what I mean? Hey, if there's a bunch of kids out there that want to get their CDLs and start driving around the country and see a bunch of shit while also taking cargo, great.
Okay. Do you think
But
Trump's tariff war had an effect? And when he issued the demand for people to change their supply chains back then, do you think any of that has an effect on this?
it might have some, but a lot of those tariffs are actually still in effect.
Yeah.
So
I just
that's
remember him saying, "Hey, Apple, you got to shorten your supply chains." And that everybody said, "Well, this is going to disrupt everything." And now we're 2 years later, and I just want to remind people that people were tinkering with this system before COVID. You know what I
yeah.
mean?
I
Mhm.
don't think Trump's policies there did anything with that, because the tariffs are still there and in place. If the tariffs had been lifted and suddenly we were seeing a flood of
Yeah.
goods returning to the market because they'd been
Hmm.
tariffed, that would be another. But since the tariffs are still in place, the answer is no.
I just didn't know if like the supply chains were disrupted because we were in the middle of shortening them. You know what I mean? Like, because we always talk about shorten the supply chains, bring these companies to the southern Mesoic regions, and let's start working with our partners and allies and neighbors in the region. And
The
I
only
didn't
supply
know
chains that we're really looking at shortening are uh, me-
China.
required medical equipment. We're looking at having that produced in the country,
Hmm.
and semiconductors. We're looking at having those produced in the country. Um,
Right.
and really, that's about it. And most of this other stuff is, just your standards that everyday people are buying.
I got you.
So,
Okay.
yeah.
Well, here's your jam. Large companies are saying that they want to expand hours and days so that they can move more items. And I want to know if these companies are going to be compensating people for their time. You know what I mean? I want to know if employees with are they going to get overtime, job security? Are they going to get benefits, paid leave, and the promise of a pay structure that rises with inflation, cost of living, and company profits? Do you think that's going to happen?
Well, basically where you're at now is that you have a labor shortage in the market.
Hmm.
And
Yeah,
so, yeah, they're like, yeah, we're going to hire people to work around the clock. Uh, so you can't fill the positions that you have. So you're going to expand the time slots to also not fill the positions that you
that's
have.
my yeah, right. Are you gonna create like the Walmart version 4 hour no benefit shift and just pour people in there and break their bodies? Or are you gonna actually reform the pay structure so people want the jobs?
I think it's hard to say. I
Yeah, I
mean,
know.
to me, it's one of those things where I think that ultimately what's going to happen is that you're going to have to change your work structure, whatever it
Hmm.
is, whether it's you're going to have more work from home, or you're going to have um, more scheduling flexibility. I think is really the big one.
Right,
Just because, you're going to have a number of people who can't work the 8 to 5 that you're expecting.
right. Um, so prices are high because of the bottlenecks. If the bottlenecks are relieved, do you think prices are going to go back down to pre-COVID levels?
Some will, yes,
Yeah, you think
some,
so? Like
not all.
wood and stuff like that.
Mm, yeah, that's more a function of wood tends to be more a function of policy.
Hmm.
And unfortunately, I will say this, unfortunately, when the Democrats are in office, um, their anti-forestry policies tend to
Right.
make new construction harder. It's why you see booms during Republican eras, because
I
they
gotcha.
relax forestry. And what it boils down to is that, we keep having this discussion of what forest management looks like, and we're not allowing forest management to happen the way that it needs to. We have so many resources, and in the face of so many wildfires and so much climate change, we need to have the ability to do what we need to do with the forest systems that we have, um, to maintain, number one, wildlife. Because guess what? These wildfires that are ripping through, they're destroying precious wildlife too, and endangered species. But targeted forestry and a good forestry policy is also going to relieve two of those stresses. Number one, the stress of needing wildland firefighters to handle all of these wildfires that we're seeing in the face of climate change. But number two, these spikes in prices of wood, of lumber products, because the lack of availability, and we're having to import all of these lumber products from other countries. Good forestry practices in the western part of the country would do more to solve those two problems, because the reality is that you might have this notion that, oh, these companies are just going to come in and clear cut. Yeah, if you don't put any rules behind it, absolutely they can. But if you put a bunch of rules behind it, it's like, here's where you can cut, here's where you can't cut, here's we're going to keep some old growth, here's where you're going to be able to cut down, here's how you have to maintain the land once you've cut it down.
Mhm.
you know the idea that you can't have working forests is just absolutely insane.
That's what Florida is. Northern Florida is all working forests. It'll be a field one day, it'll be trees the next day. You know what I mean? That's how they do it.
And that's how it should be done, is that you need to have the systems in place in order to, because if you don't clear these fuels, when these wildfires come ripping through, what do you expect? Bunch of down fuels, bunch of old dead trees.
Hmm.
And then what ends up happening is you end up having these fires burn hotter than they should, and they end up sterilizing the ground that they burn over.
Wow, I didn't even think of that.
So, I mean, that's the reality, is that yes, you need, there are areas that absolutely need prescribed burns, and you can still prescribe those burns and still make that happen. But if you allow all of these fuels to build up, and especially when you hit a really fucking dry year like we had, if things had gone off like 90 days without rain, if things had gone off after about day 60, oh man, this place was a tinderbox. Luckily it didn't, and we're very lucky that it didn't. But heavy fuels and lots of fuel is going to lead to hotter fires. It's going to sterilize the land, and you do see that consistently in places that are mismanaged.
Yeah. And we have a outdated infrastructure system traveling through our forests that can just randomly cause fires. So we're going to work on that too.
Mm-hmm.
So Joe Biden says we just need to work harder. We need to work longer. And I just don't think he understands that years of him being in the Senate, um, creating laws for lobbyists that work for corporations that undermine the employee's ability to have a living wage is what put him in this situation. Like you were talking about, there's a lack of truck drivers. Like people aren't going to jump in their trucks because Joe Biden says so, right? And you're
Mm-hmm.
not compensating people. That's why they're leaving in
Mm-hmm.
droves, because you're not paying them enough. And work on paying people more. I haven't heard in any of this supply chain bottlenecking increased wages. I haven't heard anybody speak like we need to treat our employees better. They're just saying go work overtime. And I've had managers like that my whole life. Go work harder. Can you work harder? No, pay me more.
Like hell no. It's like I've got shit that I want to do. I got a life that I want to live.
Right, exactly. But that seems to be what it is. It's always the rich guy asking the poor guy to work a little harder because he has a problem.
Yep.
I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. I think Joe is a working guy. I just don't think he understands what's happened to the working man's what companies do, what companies try with like these 4-hour shifts, not having healthcare, like not paying your employees enough, Disney, so that they're unemployed, but then have to come to work every day and climb into that suit. It's like
Right.
you've spent 50, wait, we're up to like 70 years now of just attacking the employees' rights. And now you're wondering why nobody wants to help you debottleneck a supply chain that shouldn't even be bottlenecked because it should have been shortened already. You know what I mean?
Right. So,
Help me fix my problem because I don't want to. That's what it sounds like to me. And it just irritates me. I know it has to be fixed, and I know we're Americans and we're going to do it. And I know we're not going to get compensated after. We're going to get a hearty pat on the back on TV, and then we're going to move on to another
we're not
crisis,
even. I'm glad you think that we're going to get the hearty pat on the back on TV, because I don't even think we're going to get that.
Well, he's going to have a speech saying, Americans did it. We did it. No, you didn't do it. You just told somebody else to do it. That's the way I feel about management. He just sounded like management to me. Go
Yep.
work your overtime. It's not going to be overtime, Joe. They're going to make like 4-hour shifts, 6-hour shifts. So nobody gets overtime. They're just going to bring in lower wage employees to do the job half-assed because they're not trained enough. And then you're going to blame it all on the other people that have been there longer. I know how management and, workers work. That's my
Hmm.
life.
Yep.
So
Yeah.
I don't know. We should work on shortening the supply chains. If we're going to have these bottlenecks, we should prevent them in the future. It seems like we're not preventing them. We're just
Shifting
dealing
them
with.
to a new place.
Yeah, we're just shifting the problem to a new place. And it seems like every other problem the government has, hey, help us fix it, but we're not going to do anything to help you.
Yep. Sounds about right.
So um people are saying Walgreens are closing all over San Francisco because of widespread theft. But the data says it isn't widespread theft. And Walgreens is looking to close 5 stores. And those 5 stores on average have had about 2 thefts a year. Have you heard anything about this, or should we just move on? It
I
sounds like
haven't
a
heard
San
anything about
Francisco
this.
story.
It sounds like a San Francisco story. And reality wise, every store has theft built into their profit model. Period.
Mm-hmm.
End of story.
Yeah. Okay. All right. You asked me to, well, no, I told you I needed to, and you told me we needed to. So, constitutional conversation. Jeffrey, I'm trying to read the Constitution, and
Hmm.
I can't get past the first line because it really bugs me. It says, "We the people of the United States, in order to form a perfect union, establish justice," and I can't get past that. I
Welcome to
don't
most people who claim to know the Constitution.
I'm trying. I'm really trying to. I'm wrapping my head around what does that mean? Establish justice in a country where certain people were 3/5.
Well, one of the things that just have to keep in mind is that, you know, established justice is an ongoing goal. It's not a destination.
Okay.
And I guarantee you that, the next piece of justice that we establish, there's going to be a next one that we're going to have to fight for. Once black people are treated as equals to white people, then we're going to move on to the LGBTQ crowd, and it's just going to be this ongoing work of what does justice
Sure.
actually look like. I, and because that has changed so much over time, it's
Mhm.
it's just one of those things where you're never done.
Good.
Justice is never done.
Okay. But we're still striving for it.
Yep.
Okay. I love that. That's about all I have. I don't want to get too deep in it. I did make a note for Article 1, Section 1. There's a lot of stuff in that.
Hmm.
I don't think we really need to go through the ins and outs, but the preamble is important because it says we the people. And
Hmm.
that's you and me. That's like they were gonna create a government, and the people were like, we don't want it. And they were like, but we need it. And the people were like, we don't want it, but here's our contract.
Hmm.
We'll take your government, but it can only do certain things and it can't do other things. And so I think people need to learn the Constitution because it is our contract with a government that's trying to subvert the contract. So
Yep.
that's about it. All right. I guess I'll ask about movies. Anything good?
I'm watching Midnight Mass right now on Netflix.
The fuck is that? What's Midnight Mass, you
So if
atheist?
you so if you know what the Haunting of Hill House and the Haunting of Bly Manor is,
Mm-hmm.
it's the next one in that group of uh series.
Is
It's they're
Haunting on
not.
Hill House a Netflix thing?
Yes, the Haunting of Hill House is a Netflix thing,
That's awesome.
and
Okay.
same with Haunting of Bly Manor. Um, so yeah, I'm started on that, and so far
Okay.
I'm liking what I'm seeing. It's going to be
I love
interesting. I
it.
can't wait to dig into this even more.
I love that. Do you know anything about the Panama Papers?
Yes, I
Okay.
do.
I watched that documentary.
Oh, I haven't watched the documentary on it yet, but I remember the initial hack. Yeah.
Right, right. And it was really more about the journalists than the information in it. It was more about the 160 journalists getting together to do this story, and they're still digging into it. And I thought it was interesting. What I thought was really interesting was that Donald Trump appeared in it over 3,000 times.
Oh, they don't care. That group
I know,
doesn't
isn't it
care.
amazing how people don't care about certain things, but then just care about the other things? Like the things
Hmm.
that are just bullshit rhetoric that Donald Trump turned red yelling at immigrants.
Hmm.
No, but the meaningful stuff about him having money in shell corporations that are being slid around the world and filled by nefarious people, no, that's no big thing. We don't want to get into that, but he was in there.
Yep. I mean, every person that has money is in there. I guarantee you.
you know, it isn't as widespread in United States politics, but there's a lot of man, the Danish prime minister got busted in that. What not Tony Blair, one of the David Cameron. He got
David Cameron.
yeah, he got I mean, a lot of people got caught up in that. And
Hmm.
I think it's not here because, well, we can just hide it. We don't have to pay taxes anyway. So why bother hiding anything? You know what I mean?
Yep.
Yeah. All right. I love you. How's Debbie?
Oh, Debbie's doing great. We're all, like I said, we
That's
all got
right.
colds, and everybody's recovering. So
Okay. Well, I appreciate all of you very much. Glad you're on the planet.
yeehaw.
Yay. Love you. Bye.
Bye.
I love that. Oh, recording stopped.
Alrighty, time for me to go figure out what I'm gonna go do.
Yeah. I
Need to,
appreciate you, Jeffrey. Thank you for doing this, by the way.
yeah.